Hello Year 11. So today we're going to talk about Charge the Light Brigade and Bayonet Charge. So I'm going to go through both poems and then we're going to do a point of comparison between the two. So just a quick synopsis of both poems. Charge the Light Brigade, written in 1854. It's a 19th century poem about the Crimean War. Alfred Lord Tennyson, former poet laureate. The poem centers on the Battle of Balaclava and how the soldiers in the British cavalry should never have been in this position. This poem is a dramatic tribute to the British cavalry involved in the ill-advised charge on the 25th of October 1854. So his whole poem is kind of an epitaph and a memorandum for those soldiers who have lost their lives. They should never have been in that position because they had swords where the Russians had guns. It was a mistake by a commander. Bayonet Charge, written in 1957, 20th century poem about the First World War. Hughes, also poet laureate in 1984 to 1998, and the poem centers on a description of the few desperate moments a soldier's charge against a defended position, dramatizing the feelings of fear, dislocation, and confusion. So this poem is Hughes kind of commenting on the propaganda of the time. He's ironic in his poem because he wants to attack the ideology that going to war was heroic and it was a great thing to do, when in actual fact, when you're in war, it was terrible. So a little bit of context then with Charge of the Light Brigade. It's based on real events and shows the dutiful and courageous soldiers that face almost certain death. There is some subtle criticism of those leaders who made poor leadership, so they should never have had to charge against the Russians. But the overriding message is one of honor and heroism, which Tennyson conveys in his poem, and it is all about glorifying the patriotism of fighting for your country. Okay, this is also similar with Bayonet Charge, where that is critiqued. So we know it's set in the Crimean War. It's 3 years, 1853 to 1856, in which Russia lost an alliance made up of Ottoman Empire, France, United Kingdom, and Sardinia. It was an idea to defend Turkey from Russian expansion. Okay, Russia didn't want that to happen, because they wanted the trade routes for themselves. The Battle of Balaclava was fought on 1854 October 25th. British forces aimed to capture Russian port of Sevastopol. The main premise, or the main idea of this, was that the cavalry did succeed but suffered heavy casualties, so not everyone returned. In the Light Brigade there was about 600 men, on horseback with swords and lances as weapons, hence the name. They were told to charge against Russian Cossacks with loads of guns. So really, the idea was that they were not going to succeed. Bravery was honoured with a statue in 2004. So a little bit about why he wrote the poem. Okay, so Tennyson, as you know, was poet laureate in Victoria's time. I've already told you that. He also wrote other well-known poems like The Lady of Shalott. But the main thing was, after reading the Times newspaper about the Battle of Balaclava and how it was described, this is when he decided to write his poem. So this is a little insight into what the article actually said. It's quite interesting because some of the things in the actual article he includes in his poem. Okay, so things like smoke of batteries, flood of smoke and flame, diminished in rank, clouds of smoke, scattering. These ideas are captured in his poem. So for those, because I want to kind of challenge you to reading around more about him and his poem, there's a couple of links there for you to have a look at. So let's begin then with the poem. So let's start with structure there. So there's 3 things I want to talk about with structure. So structure length. So the first 3 stanzas are equal in length. 4 and 5 are longer to represent the intensity of the actual battle. whereas stanza 6 is shortest to show the sacrifices made. So a nice thing you can say is actually that the stanza length mirrors kind of the intensity and how the sacrifices were made in battle, because the shortest stanza at the end kind of signifies the sacrifice that was made. Now, quite a sophisticated term then is this rhythm, which is dactylic meter, which is one stressed syllable followed by two unstressed syllables, which give the poem its energy and urgency. Di-dum, 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 di-dum. Now it's interesting because it reflects this idea of a horse's gallop, okay? And that continuous di-dum, 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 it kind of reiterates the fact that they are charging continuously without falling back. So it gives it, the poem, that urgency, that drive, that pace, reinforcing how these soldiers are not coming back. There's also elements of enjambment. Okay, now when we talk about structure, it's always good to say two or three things about the enjambment. Okay, so as an idea of it could show the ongoing courage of the soldiers, could show the constant or continuous lives in war. Yeah, war is continuous. Or it could show the transition between life and death. Yeah, because no matter how many times they charge, the cannon fire still fires, the soldiers die, but the war carries on. So let's go into a little bit of the language then. So the opening, we've talked about dactylic meter, okay? Now a league is a measure of distance, okay? So again, it gives us a sense of how far they're traveling. This is combined with the preposition onward to demonstrate the unwavering determination to fulfill their duty. Yeah, so there is no hesitation with the soldiers. Yeah, they're like dehumanized. They are like machines. The personification then of Valley of Death, yeah, is significant. The capitalization of death implies that the valley is owned by death. Yeah, death is a living entity waiting to take the soldiers' lives. Okay. It's also, yeah, reference to Psalm 23 in the Bible. Okay. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Yes, so it can also, because it's significantly linked to the Bible, it shows the importance of these soldiers. And what Tennyson is doing is he's reiterating their strength and courage, and that they should be remembered just like we should remember the Bible. Okay. Finally, then there's imperatives forward and charge, which really solidify to us as readers how they were obedient soldiers and that they would not turn back no matter what. So in stanza 2 then, again, you can see there are imperatives. There's not to make reply, to reason why, there's but to do and die. Okay, so again it reiterates that there is no going back for these soldiers. So really, this anaphora then, where you use there's not, so the beginning of the sentence is repeated, highlights how dehumanized they are. They would just follow orders. The poet also uses a hyperphora, so not anaphora, where the beginning of the phrases are the same, but where you answer a rhetorical question. Okay? Was there a man dismayed? No, the soldier knew someone had blundered. So, this is significant, and that's because they do not hesitate to fulfill their duty, even though there may be a negative emotion against it, or here it says, even though they didn't know that there was a blunder. Okay? So, however, this is also euphemistic. So what euphemistic means, is it makes it less hard-hitting. So instead of saying they died the most tragic way, you just say they passed away. It's a nicer way of saying it. So the euphemistic verb here, blundered, it seems less severe. Okay? Again, we've got reference to the Valley of Death. Okay? Tennyson does this, repeats this religious quote to show the importance of these soldiers' kind of journey or ride into the unknown. Third stanza, another anaphora is used, kind of to the right of them, to the left, and in front of them. So this anaphora then again cements this idea that they are surrounded. They are trapped and ensnared by the enemy. Okay? They cannot escape. They're encompassed on all sides. You've got some vicious verbs there: volleyed, thundered, stormed. Okay? It's interesting because they all link to the weather. Okay? So by having this kind of imagery of the weather and aggression, yeah, it also kind of emphasizes the aggression of the actual battle. Okay, sibilance here, we got stormed and shot, and the alliteration also could reiterate or reflect kind of the wind and the shooting in the actual battle. Okay, so there's a few things here. Another thing is the adverb boldly. Okay, so if you look at the adverb boldly, yeah, it also demonstrates how brave these soldiers are. Yeah, remember, this is the message that Tennyson is trying to get through. Jaws of death, mouth of hell. Okay, we've got personification in both lines. Okay, now by giving jaws and mouth, we know that something that goes past our mouth or jaws again will not come back. Okay. In addition, yeah, jaws and mouth again is associated with animalistic imagery. Yeah, animals usually attack with their mouth or their jaws. So again, it's quite important. Stanza 4, so there's a lexical field. Now what a lexical field is, you may have heard it as a semantic field. Okay, they all show an idea of unbreakable determination. Okay, charging, plunged. Okay, powerful verbs are used to show the unbreakable determination: plunge, charging, sabering, flash. They remind us that they did not have sufficient weapons, but they refused to back down. So this lexical field really cements how brave they are regardless of what they face. The line "all the world wondered" alludes to those at home who they have heard, likely on the news, what was happening during this battle, and they too questioned the decision and the huge impact it made. Yeah, so again, we've got this idea of questioning the government's decision to put these soldiers in war. Again, this is similar with Bayonet Charge, where the soldier stops and looks up at the sky and the stars and questions his position. Is it fate that he's in this position? Again, an attack against the kind of ideology, the patriotic ideology of the time, that was great, honourable to fight for your country. Furthermore, we've got more verbs: shattered and sundered. Okay, again, supports their shock at being, because it's a sibilance, okay, these words are very heavy on the tongue. Okay, shattered, sundered, it shows how great the loss was for these soldiers. Now let's move on to stanza 5. Okay, now a lot of stanza 5 repeats previous sentences from the other stanzas. Okay, now this is because it's a little bit of a turning point where now they are on the retreat and we realize that there's not many soldiers left. So what Tennyson wants to show us is that through this kind of reiteration of phrases, shows that now the battle is kind of ending, they're on the return, but loads of people or loads of soldiers will not return. Okay, so it again shows the brutality of the battle and the courage they've had and the sacrifice they've made. There is an allusion to horse and hero. Okay, yes, it's an alliteration. It draws our attention to it. He knows that we need to honour these soldiers. Also, a lot of prepositions, yes, so in relation to position, to show that their return was both incredible, but it was also a sadness because they were consumed by the jaws of death. The last one then is, in this last stanza, we have a rhetorical question, we have some imperatives, and we kind of have this epitaph where we need to honour those that have kind of passed on. So the rhetorical question here is to guide us to one conclusion, that we must honour these soldiers and their glory must never fade. Yeah, we've got an abstract noun recognises, which shows the quality of their strength and their worth. We've got imperative verbs to show the gratitude and respect for the soldiers. We do not have a choice. It is required that we honour them. Yeah, and that last bit, it shows that the poem becomes a kind of epitaph, like a written memory to those who have given their life. Okay, so that is something you must take away from this poem, that becomes this epitaph. It's Tennyson writing a poem in honour of those who gave their life. So let's move on to Bayonet Charge. So a little bit about Ted Hughes. So he actually served in the RAF at the end of World War II. Okay, so he's interested in the natural world, countryside, and history, which we kind of see nuances, hints of, in his poem. Okay, so we know it describes this poem, a young soldier experience, over the top in World War I, yeah, going over the trenches. During the poem, the soldier transformed from a frightened young boy into a dangerous weapon of war. So let's look at the rhythm and the structure then. So we know that the first stanza, okay, is all action, running, soldier is awake, very fast paced, okay. So it kind of mirrors this kind of chaotic sense for the soldier. The second stanza starts to slow down, starts to have caesuras, yeah, where there's a pause in the middle of a sentence, and this kind of shows how maybe the soldier is beginning to question his position in war, yeah, against why the government have put him in this position. The second half, kind of in the third stanza, breaks the spell, and he has to then again rush towards his death in the final stanza. Okay, so again, this whole position he's in, that middle stanza where he starts to question it, is Hughes commenting on the patriotic propaganda of the time, how honourable it was and heroic it was to fight for your country, whereas in actual fact, when you were in war, it was terrifying, awful. Yeah, these soldiers should never have had to have gone through this. So two key points then. So there's moments of enjambment. Okay, remember, we must always say 2 or 3 things about structure or language to really show the examiner, yeah, that we are perceptive. Yeah, it's a key word in the mark scheme to get you into that top band. So this mirrors the continuous nature of the soldier's charge in the poem towards that green hedge, yeah, their salvation. He is not safe until he's out of no man's land. So in addition, the run-on sentences accentuate the chaotic situation the soldier is in, because it highlights how fast-paced and frenzied the soldier is when he must charge. Okay, so you've got the continuous nature here of he's frenzied. He has to keep running no matter what is thrown at him because he needs to reach that pace of salvation. Also, remember in war, if he dies, the war carries on. The soldiers, unfortunately, are insignificant in the greater scheme of things. So again, the enjambment could also mirror this idea, yeah, that their life is transient, short-lasting, whereas war carries on. Second point then is the moments of caesura. So there's 2 key moments I want to draw your attention to, and that's in the middle where it says pointing that second. Yes, so it's where he talks about the clocks pointing that second. Okay, and the second one is where he's running and all of a sudden his foot hangs statuary in mid-stride. So that first example of pointing that second is synonymous with the soldier questioning his position, about whether it is fate that is in this position in war. Yeah, we've got the reference to the clocks. Yeah, the clock in the stars, cold clock of the stars. Stars are to do with kind of people's fate. Furthermore, it becomes a diatribe or polemic comment. So what I mean by that means an attack for Hughes against the government and how denounced they were to the horrors the soldiers faced. So back home, yeah, they were not aware of the horrors that these soldiers faced because the media, the newspapers, didn't comment on it. Okay, it was all about this, yeah, it's so honourable, great to fight for your country. Whereas when you're in the war, okay, It's completely the opposite. So he's a little bit of an attack and a critic, or criticizing this ideology. The second example then only underpins how the soldier physically stops while running. He actually stops when running, yeah. Probably more they didn't, but Hughes does this to stress how bewildered and hopeless the soldiers feel, yeah, where they stop and begin to ponder why they are in this position. It's a hyperbolic statement to show that they should not be in this position. So, a little bit of annotations then. So, I will keep this on so you can make notes as I talk. So, suddenly he awoke. So, you've got an adverb here that drops us straight into the action. Okay? So, suddenly is a line to how instantaneous it was for the soldiers to charge. Yeah, they got the call, which exemplifies how anxious and terrifying the situation was. No matter what time of day or time of night it was, if there was air siren or it went off, they would have to run. We've got in raw seemed hot khaki, so we've got two connotations of raw here. Remember, saying more about one key word really gets you up those levels. Okay, so it could show how inexperienced and young the soldier is, yeah, kind of eliciting a sympathy from the audience. But it also has connotations of pain in relation to skin, so it could mirror the physical pain or the mental distress the soldier experiences when running. Hot khaki, so khaki is what they wear, their uniforms, but it also has kind of associations with camouflage. So is this Hughes implying that these soldiers just blend into the background? Yeah, they are not significant in the greater scheme that is war. Bullets smacking the belly out of the air, it just kind of emphasizes the level of bullets and how ferocious the war is. Yeah, smacking the belly, it's like you've got winded. Okay, a really severe, painful experience. So Hughes trying to kind of attributes that to something we can understand. He lugged a rifle, numb as a smushed arm. Yeah, so it shows he's quite inexperienced because he's not very good with a rifle. But this is where we can do so much more than just saying one thing. Yeah, it could demonstrate how heavy the guns are. Yeah, but more importantly, the length of time he has to hold that bayonet for while running. Running for a long time shows what kind of this phrase, the simile itself, shows how long these soldiers have this bayonet gun in their hand. Patriotic tear. So the patriot is someone who loves their country. So by Hughes juxtaposing patriotic with tear here, suggests that this love and ideology behind patriotism and fighting for your country becomes lost when faced with horror in war. Funny then, like molten iron in this last sentence, yeah, it could show that his belief and honor he felt fighting for his country now is turning into violence, iron bullets. The imagery here also links to pain, as the actions are associated with severe heat. So molten iron is very hot. So this heat then could mirror the soldier's mental or physical distress in war. In the moment he almost stopped. So the stopped here, yeah, shows that he's slowing down, he's starting to think. But could it also link to the reality of war? It seems that soldiers' lives stand still when in the trenches. They are waiting around hours on end. The physical actions of him stopping show that he is questioning why he's in this dreadful position. In what cold clockwork of the stars? So cold clockwork, we have a CC, yeah, so a consonant sound, which emphasizes how hard and uncaring governments can be towards soldiers. Yeah, we've got a K, it's got a bitey sound, which is why consonants usually associate with things that are quite cold and uncaring. Furthermore, we've got an image of a clock to signify how the soldiers' lives in war become transient. Yeah, because like a clock ticking down like a time bomb. Yeah, when it clicks down. So is the soldier's life, yeah, transient? Is it short-lasting? And remember, soldiers' lives, when they die, war carries on. So is it showing that a soldier's death is insignificant in war? We've got listening between his footfalls for the reason. The noun reason here Yeah, could show that he doesn't know why he's running, why he's fighting. Yeah, but also we've got footfalls. Every time he takes a step, he's listening for the reason. So this exaggeration here could indicate how desperate he is to find out or find a reason for him being here. Talked about it before, statue. Standing like a statue. So we've got some connotations here of paralysis of fear, when you freeze because you're so scared. It also has connotation of bewilderment and contemplation. When you stop, you begin to think things over. So again, Hughes is being hyperbolic here, exaggerating to make it more dramatic. Yeah, to show how soldiers were frenzied, chaotic, and began to question why they were here. Why had the government forsaken them in war? And this last bit, shot/furrows. Furrows are ploughed fields. The fighting has destroyed them. Yes, we can get a physical representation of what it was like, the setting of war. Yeah, think of the battle on the Somme and No Man's Land. Hughes was known for doing this in terms of kind of the countryside. So we've got a physical representation of the setting which mirrors the soldier's mindset. Okay, the setting is destroyed, the soldier's mental stability is destroyed. There's also sibilance here, which could also underpin how sinister and unforgiving war is. Final stanza then, we've got an image of a yellow hare. Now, it could show that the soldier is scared and panicking because we've got the colour yellow, which has connotations of fear and illness. So the imagery of a hare also, though, becomes synonymous with analogy of a rabbit in headlights. I'm sure you've all heard of it. Oh, it was like a rabbit in headlights. Yeah. Now that phrase, a common phrase, is signified or relates to someone who's very nervous and is confused and doesn't know what's going on. So this imagery here shows how confused, nervous and anxious the soldier really is. Now roll like a flame. So the hare has been injured. Yeah. So the soldier could be injured. But more importantly, when you think of someone rolling like a flame, I always think of if someone's on fire, they drop and roll. Yeah, so they're in pain to try and get rid of that fire. So the fire imagery could show pain, but it could also show how unpredictable war is, because flames can become unpredictable. Also, they're fierce, which links to the nature of war. Later on, he plunged past. Now, it's an interesting word, plunge, because it's also used in Charge of the Light Brigade, and it does exactly the same here, where it speeds up the pace of the poem. Yeah, where he's now running, again, accentuating the idea how frenzied and chaotic this situation is. Okay, he is desperate. King, honor, human dignity, and etc. So we've got kind of a list of three, a list of four. Okay, but more importantly, there is a sense of irony by Hughes here. Okay, because these things that were believed by the public, the patriotic ideology, are forgotten when in war. Okay, so this is left behind when you fight for your country because it's lost through the atrocities of war. This is the last thing on every soldier's mind when actually fighting in war, because it was so terrifying. So the last phrase then, his terrors touchy dynamite. The soldier is close to exploding, losing control. The imagery here has a reference or an allusion to shell shock. Many soldiers' minds after war became unhinged by the strains of war. So this idea of the dynamite exploding could show his mind finally cracking, which alludes to shell shock. So, drawing them together then. So Tennyson's poem is an epitaph for the forgotten heroes in the Crimean War. He wants the readers to honour the Light Brigades. Notice when I've been kind of doing this presentation, I've embedded a couple of words, a couple of phrases here from the poem. Doing this yourself shows the examiner how sophisticated you are. So do kind of advocate, promote this idea of trying to do it. His imperatives and rhetoric in the poem convey this message. Both poems do allude to the terrifying ordeals of war, and both outcomes do seem hopeless for the soldiers. One is about them honouring the soldiers. Hughes takes a different approach where he is criticising the government's patriotic ideal of war. Okay? It becomes an attack on patriotic idea of war. The notion, the idea of heroism and honour becomes superseded, so overwhelmed by the true horrors of war, where soldiers become terror touchy. Hughes' rhetoric, clock and animal imagery of a hare exemplify this criticism, where soldiers should never have had to face such horror. So what we just talked about previously, shows how he's criticizing the position these soldiers are in. It was not honourable, heroic, it was devastating being in war. So we've got a quick link with the structure. So Tennyson's is much more continuous and steady. There's a dactylic meter. And we talked about how it mirrors the British cavalry, one stressed, two unstressed, just like a horse's gallop. It is this rhythm that is attributed to the soldiers' continuous march towards their demise, like the humanized machines. They will not return. This constant pace, throughout the poem shows how they did not falter. They did not question, they kept going. Hughes' poem, how this is kind of a nice distinction. His structure becomes disjointed and fragmented because of the caesuras and enjambment, which enable him to convey a frenzied and chaotic scenario for the soldier. Stop, start, stop, start. It kind of mirrors a realistic charging of a soldier in no man's land, because there's loads of mud, loads of kind of devastation. He's not going to be able to run smoothly. It's a true depiction of war, which is obscured by the patriotic ideology spread by propaganda. So back home, we did not hear of the atrocities. All we heard about was, oh, it's so good to fight for your country. This is why Hughes wrote the poem, to show what it was really like. And finally then, taking both meanings into account then, Charge Light Brigade, the poem becomes an epitaph for the heroes who served in the Battle of Balaclava. That's what Tennyson's main goal is. With Bayonet Charge, the poem becomes a polemic or a negative statement, critique against the patriotic ideology around war at the time. And what that means is he wanted to actually show the true horrors of war and what it was like, not to be clouded by the media of what it was like in war.